The golf cart screeched to a halt in
Kyle,
front of my
it has
house.
come to my attention there
Karen,
might be
the
some
HOA
concerns about
president,
your
jumped
property
out
line.
with a clipboard in
What exactly
hand,
are you
her
doing?
usual smug grin plastered across her face. But this time,
Excuse
she was
me.
about to cross a line she couldn't uncross. She didn't know it yet, but I had the entire thing on camera.
What are you doing?
The moment she reached for my mailbox,
checking
I
my
knew
mail.
this wasn't just a random inspection. She was using her power to invade my life, and I wasn't about to let her get away with it. What she didn't expect was that the trap I'd set for her would be even worse than she thought. This time she was playing my game, and she didn't even know the rules. Karen Johnson wasn't just the HOA president. She was a tyrant with a clipboard. At first, she seemed like a perfectionist, balancing the budget, making sure the lawns were trimmed just right. But soon her obsession with control became clear. A misplaced lawn chair, fine. A rose bush, growing a few inches too high, another fine. Her smile was a weapon, a thin, rehearsed line that made you feel guilty even for breathing too loudly. I never signed up for this. No one did. Her rise to power was slow, but by the time she'd become president, the neighborhood was already on edge. People started avoiding her. She was the kind of person who thrived on fear. The moment you crossed her, your life was in her hands. A strange knock on the door, an unexplained fine, an accidental inspection of your mailbox. Karen knew how to make you feel small, and she reveled in it. She had a way of turning the simplest things into a power move. The moment she started talking about mailbox inspections, I knew this was more than just about rules. This was about dominance. She was testing us, seeing who would bend and who would fight back. I'd seen enough. She wasn't going to just walk all over my life. Not this time. When Heather and I bought our house, we thought we had found the perfect place, a quiet neighborhood where we could put down roots, raise a family, and live peacefully. The lawns were lush, the streets lined with trees, and neighbors actually talked to each other. The sound of kids playing in the cul-de-sac and the occasional lawnmower hum made it feel like something out of a nostalgic sitcom. It was a small-town dream, our dream. I'm Kyle Cruz, and I'd spent years working in the city. The constant noise, the rush, it all wore me down. That's why Heather and I decided to move here. We weren't looking for drama, just a place where we could enjoy our privacy. And for 3 years, that's exactly what we had. Heather, my steady rock, kept the house running like clockwork. While I worked on the car or in the yard, she took care of everything else. She managed our security cameras, ran the budget, and even kept me in line when my DIY plumbing attempts went horribly wrong. She's the brains behind the operation, the calm in the storm. And I just followed her lead because she's always one step ahead. But all of that started to change when Karen Johnson got elected president of the HOA. It wasn't immediate at first. She seemed like a well-meaning volunteer, someone who just wanted to help. But soon the cracks began to show. The first note she left on our door seemed harmless enough, a friendly reminder to mow the lawn a day earlier. Then came the suggestions about our mailbox design, the approved shade of beige for the trim, the fines for leaving the trash cans out for 10 minutes past curfew. Little by little, Karen started taking control, and it didn't take long before everyone started following her lead. We kept quiet at first. After all, what could be the harm in a little more order? But Karen didn't stop at a perfectly manicured lawn. She started creating rules no one had ever heard of, rules that made the neighborhood feel like a sanitized version of itself. It didn't take long before she began pushing boundaries, testing us to see how far she could go before someone would stand up to her. That's when she sent out the first letter announcing a new bylaw that gave her and the HOA the right to inspect mailboxes. She had crossed the line. It all started with a letter. Not the usual HOA newsletter about lawn care or pool hours, but something more intrusive, something that sent a chill down my spine. I came home from work one Tuesday to find a crisp white envelope taped to our front door. It wasn't just ours, every door on the block had one. It looked official, the HOA logo stamped in the corner with a picture of a smiling sun over a perfect hedge. It was a strange corporate cheerfulness, but the message was clear. Mailbox, hygiene, and security inspections effective immediately. I read it over Heather's shoulder, my stomach twisting with each word. It stated that due to an increase in mail theft, which I had never once heard of in our neighborhood, the HOA was now granted the authority to conduct random unannounced inspections of all mailboxes, to ensure they were clean and free of pests, and not being used for unauthorized materials. I looked over at Heather, who was already tense, her fingers flying over her laptop. "They can't do this," she said, shaking her head. "This is illegal. It's a federal offense." I crumpled the paper in my fist, looking out the window. Karen's curtains twitched across the street. She was watching. No doubt about it. I couldn't prove it yet, but she had orchestrated this, and this was just the beginning. Karen, the new queen of petty HOA power plays, had officially crossed the line. We had no intention of backing down, but the others, the Garcias, Mr. Henderson, the Millers, they wouldn't speak up. They would just bow their heads and follow along, scared of the consequences of doing anything else. The fear Karen instilled in the neighborhood was palpable. That was just the start. As the days passed, Karen began her new reign of terror. The mailbox inspection rule was just one of many little infractions she began to enforce. But it wasn't enough to leave notices in our mailboxes. She had to show us she had the right to invade our lives, our homes. Heather and I decided to test it. We kept our mailbox locked, but Karen wasn't going to let that stop her. One evening after dinner, I saw Karen's golf cart slow down in front of our house. She was sitting there with a clipboard in hand, staring at the mailboxes in front of the cluster. I glanced at Heather, whose expression mirrored my own, a mix of frustration and disbelief. "Let's take a walk," I said to Heather, trying to keep my cool. As we strolled by, we caught Karen sneaking a look at the mailboxes, squinting like she was inspecting each one from the street. She wasn't just looking at the neat little rows of boxes, she was sizing up the entire neighborhood. Her power trip was escalating, and there was nothing to stop her. When we returned to our front porch, I saw something on the ground by the mailbox. A little note with a smiley face at the bottom and a neat little reminder. Mailbox must be easily accessible, free of personal locks. I'd had enough. This was no longer just about rules. This was about control. She wasn't just inspecting mailboxes, she was looking for any excuse to invade our privacy. It wasn't until the next day that we realized just how far Karen was willing to go. I had to run a quick errand, but when I got home, I noticed something strange. Our mailbox was slightly ajar. It wasn't wide open, but it had clearly been tampered with. I had checked it that morning, and it had been locked just the way we always kept it. I didn't want to believe it, but my gut told me Karen had gotten a copy of the key. I checked the lock, then glanced over at Karen's house. Her curtains twitched again. This wasn't just a violation, it was a blatant act of intrusion. She had crossed a serious line, tampering with our property, and I was furious. But Heather was already thinking ahead. She knew we needed more than just suspicion. We needed hard evidence. I called the locksmith and had the locks changed, but it was clear this wasn't going to stop her. She wasn't just targeting us anymore, she was sending a message to everyone on the block. The situation reached a boiling point when Karen made her biggest mistake. After the tampered mailbox incident, we called the police, and they showed up to investigate the matter. But it wasn't the police who had to worry, they were just doing their job. Karen had taken things too far, and now she was trying to cover her tracks. The next evening, I saw her again, this time in front of the mailbox kiosk, standing next to a patrol car. She was talking to Officer Mills, explaining the so-called community inspection initiative, as if she were above reproach. I couldn't just stand by anymore. "Is everything okay, officer?" I asked, stepping toward them. Karen turned her face tight with annoyance. "Just doing my job, Kyle. I'm making sure the neighborhood is safe." "Safe," I repeated, staring her down. "You're invading people's privacy. That's not safety. That's harassment." Karen looked like she wanted to say more, but Officer Mills just waved me off. "We're handling it, Mr. Cruz. No need to escalate things." No need to escalate. I wasn't about to let this go. That night, I stayed up late and began reviewing HOA regulations, zoning laws, anything that would give us the leverage to fight back. Heather and I were ready to turn this around, but first we needed a way to show Karen's true nature. That's when the idea for the trap was born. 3 days later, it happened. The moment that would change everything. I was sitting in my car near the mailbox kiosk, just watching when Karen's golf cart appeared on the horizon. My heart pounded. I could tell she was up to something. Her movements were deliberate, too careful. She parked her cart next to the kiosk and without hesitation unlocked the panel to the master mailbox key. This was it. This was the proof we needed. Karen wasn't just inspecting, she was committing a federal crime. I stepped out of the car slowly. "Looking for something, Karen?" I asked, my voice calm but filled with the anger I'd been holding back for days. She froze her eyes wide. "Kyle, what are you doing here?" she stammered, her hand shaking as she dropped her flashlight. "Where did you get that key?" I asked, pointing to the unlocked panel. "That's a federal crime." Her face went pale as she sputtered, trying to justify herself. But it was too late. I had her caught in the act, and the neighborhood was watching. The trap had been set. She had walked right into it. The moment Karen saw me, she went into full damage control mode. "Kyle, what are you doing here?" she stammered, her eyes wide with panic. She dropped her flashlight and it skittered across the pavement, its beam cutting erratically through the dark. "You've been caught, Karen," I said, my voice steady but my fists clenched. "You're breaking the law." She blinked, trying to process what was happening. Then suddenly, like a switch had flipped, she shot back. "You're harassing me!" "This is private property." Her voice wavered, but her fear was masked by an immediate attempt to play the victim. "I'm not the one going through people's mail," I retorted. "Where did you get that key?" The words hung between us, heavy with the weight of what I'd just uncovered. I took a step closer, just enough to let her know that the game was up. And then, like a twisted performance, she stepped back. I'm calling the police. You're threatening me," she shouted, pulling out her phone. Before I could even respond, I saw the headlights of a car creeping up behind her. Barry. Of course. He'd been lurking in the shadows, waiting for the chance to swoop in. His car screeched to a halt, and he leapt out, charging toward me. "Karen, are you okay?" Barry asked, eyes wide as he took in the situation. I could see the script unfold in real time, and it wasn't going to be good for me. Karen had called him in as soon as she saw me, and now she was playing the part of the damsel in distress. But I wasn't backing down. Not now. "Step away, Barry," I said, my tone unwavering. "You're being played. This isn't about me. It's about Karen breaking the law. She's been using a master key to inspect mailboxes, which is illegal." Barry puffed his chest out, trying to look tough, but it was clear he didn't know what he was getting into. "Get off my property," Barry snapped, trying to push me back. It wasn't a hard shove, but it was enough to throw me off balance. I stumbled back and my elbow hit the pavement hard. Just as I was starting to get up, Heather's voice came booming through the porch camera. "Step back. This is all recorded." The words hit Barry like a bucket of cold water. He froze, his expression changing from defiance to confusion. "Smile," I said, nodding toward the blinking LED of the camera. "You're on tape." Barry's bravado crumbled as he glanced nervously from the open mailbox to the camera, then back to me. He finally backed off, hands raised in defeat. Karen, on the other hand, was still clutching her phone, and she was still playing her role. "He's coming at me," she screamed into her phone. "He's trying to kill me with the bees." The sheer absurdity of it all hit me like a ton of bricks. Here she was accusing me of trying to harm her, when in reality I was the one standing up for my privacy. But the damage had been done. Her performance, complete with fake gasps and exaggerated gestures, had already started. She was setting the stage, and there was no turning back. But what Karen didn't know was that Heather and I had already played our hand. As Karen continued her theatrics, shouting about her supposed anaphylactic shock, I could feel the tension building. The neighbors were starting to gather, peeking out from their windows, stepping out onto their porches, unsure of what to make of the scene. It wasn't long before Officer Mills arrived, his cruiser's lights flashing in the distance. I knew this was the moment. I had to make my case, and I wasn't about to let Karen's lies win. Heather, calm as always, had already anticipated this. While Karen continued to shriek, Heather pressed play on the laptop she had brought along. The projector flickered to life. The first image on the screen was a high-resolution photo of the bogus HOA letter about mailbox inspections. "This is where it all started," Heather said coolly, her voice unwavering. "This letter right here. It's not just a violation of common sense, it's a violation of federal law." The crowd fell silent as Heather switched to the video footage. The clip from our garage camera was clear as day. It showed Karen, her face twisted in focus, using a master key to unlock the mailbox kiosk. There was no emergency, no excuse, just Karen breaking the law in front of everyone. I could feel the collective shift in the air as Karen's lies began to unravel. The video was damning, irrefutable. The silence in the room grew thick as Heather clicked to the next video. This time, the pinhole camera footage showed Karen's face as she read the bright yellow warning label, "Warning live bees. Do not open." We could see her lips form the words "live bees," and then, like she couldn't resist, her fingers reached past the warning and opened the decoy box. A moment later, the camera captured her jumping back in shock as a puff of chalk dust exploded into her face and a few harmless drone bees buzzed out. The neighbors' disbelief turned into a ripple of laughter. They had all been played. They had all been fooled by her fake hysteria, and now they were seeing the truth. Karen's face went from pale to a blotchy red. The neck brace she had been wearing now looked ridiculous. She scrambled to find an excuse, but it was too late. With a calm, measured voice, Heather presented the final piece of evidence, a scan of the official EMT report. "Here's the report from the paramedics who treated Karen that night," Heather said. "It notes that her vitals were normal, that she refused an EpiPen, and that there was no evidence of a bee sting." The crowd was now fully awake, and Karen knew it. Her empire, built on lies and intimidation, was crumbling in front of her very eyes. The room fell silent. The weight of the evidence was undeniable. Karen sat there, stiff as a board, as the reality of her downfall sank in. There was no more sympathy for her, no more false narratives to weave. She had been exposed, and the once petty tyrant was now a woman stripped of her power. The neighborhood that had been so afraid to speak up, so terrified of the consequences, had just witnessed the truth unfold. Karen's reign of fear was over, and as her face flushed with humiliation, I could see the tide turning. People were starting to look at each other again, not with suspicion but with solidarity. Nate, the quiet neighbor whose kids had once been fined for drawing on their driveway, was the first to break the silence. He stood up, shaking but resolute. "I'm tired of being afraid," he said, his voice clear but shaky. "I'm tired of my kids not being able to do something as simple as drawing on the sidewalk without fear of punishment. It's time we took a stand." His words were the spark. Mrs. Miller, who had been silenced by Karen's aesthetic tyranny over her beloved garden gnome, followed suit. "And I want Gus back," she declared, her voice filled with newfound courage. "My garden gnome wasn't hurting anyone." A chorus of voices rose up one after another as neighbors began to speak out against the injustice they had endured for so long. The fear that Karen had instilled in the community was replaced by something more powerful: unity. But the battle wasn't over yet. Karen might have lost her grip on the neighborhood, but the legal consequences were still looming. Postal Inspector Ramos, who had been silently watching the proceedings, stepped forward after the chaos had begun to settle. His calm, authoritative presence filled the room. Without a word, he handed Karen a folded piece of paper. "Karen Johnson," he said, his voice carrying easily through the now quiet room. "This is an official citation from the United States Postal Inspection Service. You are cited for unlawful mail tampering. A false report is also under review." Karen's face drained of color as she stared at the citation, the weight of federal law crashing down on her. The moment she received that citation, her position as HOA president was all but over. The master key was confiscated, and it was revealed that she had obtained it from a retired postmaster who had been forced into early retirement. The implications were severe. She could face heavy fines, possible jail time, and a criminal record that would follow her for years. Her attempt to create a reign of terror had backfired spectacularly. The very system she had tried to manipulate had turned on her. Karen's personal and professional downfall didn't stop there. Within a month, she and her husband were forced to put their house on the market. It was a quiet exit, though not nearly as quiet as Karen had hoped. The whispers of her deceit, of her manipulation, spread like wildfire through the neighborhood. Her false claims, her illegal actions, and her cruel reign were now public knowledge. She never returned. As for the rest of us, the community that had once been fractured by fear, we found our voice. With Karen gone, the new HOA board was elected, led by none other than Nate, the man whose children had been bullied for drawing chalk art. His first official act as president was to introduce the Gus and Sidewalk Chalk Act, a new bylaw that explicitly protected lawn ornaments and children's temporary art. The entire community voted unanimously in favor of it. We were taking back what Karen had tried to steal: our peace of mind, our joy, and our sense of belonging. But the biggest transformation came when we decided to turn the symbol of oppression, the mail kiosk, into something beautiful. Mrs. Miller, who had suffered quietly for so long, had an idea: let's plant something for the bees. She had seen the way the community had come together to support each other, and now it was time to give something back. The kids, the adults, the old and the young, all came together on that Saturday to replace the harsh HOA-approved bushes around the mailboxes with a colorful pollinator garden. Lavender bee balm and coneflowers were planted in the soil where the old sad bushes had once stood. It was a moment of triumph not just for me and Heather, but for the entire neighborhood. We had faced down a bully. We had fought back with intellect, with evidence, and with the law on our side. And in the end, we had turned a symbol of oppression into a place of beauty. The air was filled with the buzz of bees, a sound I had once feared would be associated with Karen's manipulation, now becoming a symbol of freedom. As I stood back and watched the community come together, my heart swelled with pride. We had done it. And as I looked over at Heather, her eyes twinkling with satisfaction, I knew one thing for sure: justice, as it turns out, could be sweet. Sometimes it even comes with flowers.